My name is Dr. Michael Kelly. On behalf of the All One Foundation, on behalf of the Autism Collaborative Centers of Excellence, and on behalf of the University of Scranton's Peniska College of Professional Studies, it's my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome you here to our series of town hall meetings focusing on autism and related disabilities. Before we get started on the topic tonight, which of course is facts and fictions of autism, I need to cover just a few things. First of all, as you see on the screen, our disclaimer here that all live sessions are recorded. If you don't want your image to be recorded, please don't turn on your video. Now, by default, we shut the videos and the audio off, but sometimes it's you're able to turn them back on there. We ask that you turn it off if it's on right now. If your name, when you log in, identifies you and you don't wish to be identified, please log out and log back in with a pseudonym. Also, we're going to be able to communicate in two ways. You'll be able to hear me and see me, and then when I bring in our guest, Dr. Gravely, you'll be able to hear and see him, but you can communicate with us via the chat boxes and the Q&A feature. So you'll be muted during the sessions, but of course you can submit anything that you want, either to me privately or to the whole group. We ask though that you don't write anything in the chat boxes that would include any identifying information if you don't wish to be identified. And of course, please don't include any identifying information about anybody else. Because these are recorded, we do make them available. Typically the university makes these recordings available on Mondays at 3 p.m. So this should show up on the website in about just under a week. Also, I want to be clear about the nature of these town hall meetings. So these are meant to be educational, informative, and in fact, these kind of came about as a part of this wonderful grassroots effort here in Northeast Pennsylvania, starting with the All One Foundation and the University of Scranton and a bunch of other people in this 13 county area. We're trying to connect individuals, parents, caregivers, therapists, anyone who's affected by autism and related disorders. And so although I'm a licensed psychologist and I'm a board certified behavioral analyst and I do engage in therapy, and the other presenters do engage in therapy, this is not a therapeutic relationship, right? I'm here to provide tips, tricks, information, education, above all, hope for the future, especially during this COVID-19 era. Had enough. I'm sure you feel the same way. So I am prepared, and Dr. Gravely is prepared to talk once I bring him on for the 45 minutes or what's remaining of the 45 minutes. But I sincerely hope that this is a didactic interaction by answering any questions that you have and any questions you have for our special guest, Dr. Gravely, once I bring him in. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing this one here and start sharing my PowerPoint. All right, facts and fictions about autism. So before I get into some of like the the specifics, the facts and fictions, I want to sort of frame what we're talking about here, okay? Sort of put us on the same page as a starting point. First of all, there's a lot we don't know about autism, but there is a lot that we do know about autism. There's a gigantic scientific literature around autism. And when I talk about that gigantic scientific literature, I want to also tell you, like, you cannot possibly know everything about autism, even if you have tremendous expertise in one area. In fact, I was asked a question in the last facts and fictions of autism, and I thought I knew the answer, but I wasn't sure, right? And what I didn't want to do is to say something that wasn't true, right? Especially when it's being recorded. And so I said, I don't know, but I'll find out for next time. And even though I have expertise in autism for assessment and intervention, particularly for young children, who do early intervention therapy and who engage in severe behavior problems, I wasn't exactly sure about whether a prematurely born baby, if that was a risk factor for autism. And I knew it was a risk factor for all sorts of other things like ADHD and learning disabilities and just some other academic difficulties and behavior problems. But I wasn't sure about exactly if that was a technical risk factor for autism, and it turns out it is. So I did look that up, and being born prematurely actually is a risk factor for autism. It increases the odds that an individual will end up with a diagnosis of autism. But it's a big, gigantic scientific literature, and I had to look it up. There's a genetics literature, right, where people are looking into what are the genes that are associated with autism. You know, is there a specific gene, or is there a pattern of different genes within individuals who are diagnosed with autism that intersect with something in nature that are more likely to produce a diagnosis, right? There is, in the area I'm in, it's in the behavioral phenotypes of autism, right? What it looks like, the behaviors, the deficits, and then of course, how we can assess and intervene to ameliorate the symptoms of autism. But rest assured, there is an enormous and growing every day scientific literature dedicated to autism. Second, it could be very difficult for non-professionals to be able to discern facts from fiction. And specifically, what is a scientific supported intervention versus snake oil? And you would be surprised at how very real and intuitive and promising something can sound. And it turns out that it might not have any science behind it at all, or there might be a scientific literature that makes it implausible that that particular intervention is likely to do anything about autism. I'll give you some examples, right? People swear by certain things, like certain diets and vitamin therapies and hyperbaric chambers, and on and on, right? There's lots and lots of different potential interventions for autism that don't have a science behind them. And it's really hard to tell the difference if you're not trained professionally. Third, and this is sort of like a joke, right? You know, don't confuse Google with your education. It's a joke, but it's serious too, right? There's something dangerous about going to Google and getting 7 million or 70 million or 700 million results if you type in autism assessment or autism treatment. You know, how in the world can you tell the difference between something that's scientifically supported and something that's not, right? Now, I'm an expert in behavior analysis and an expert in assessing and intervening for symptoms of autism, but I'm not an expert in dentistry or podiatry or building airplanes or whatever it is. And if I were to type in Google something about those topics and I got a bunch of results, I would have no idea. I would have no idea what is correct and what's incorrect, right? So it can seem like you just do a Google search and you can become educated very quickly about autism, but it's not true, right? You can't really replace a scientific or professional education around a scientific topic. That having been said, consumers should absolutely demand state-of-the-art empirically derived assessment and intervention. And you know, it sounds silly to say that because of course you should, right? You think about if you go to your doctor or to bring your children to a pediatrician, and imagine if that doctor graduated 2, 5, 10 years ago and hasn't done any continuing education, doesn't read the literature, doesn't change his or her practice consistent with the changes in science, bad things will happen, right? Either you'll get less effective assessments and interventions, perhaps you'll have a poorer outcome than if you had a different doctor. You might have to take a drug that has a poor side effect profile when there's a newer drug that has a better side effect profile, and so on and so forth. And I can tell you now, if I went to a doctor and they weren't up to speed with the current literature to the extent that I could detect that, I would prefer to go somewhere else, right? I would go somewhere else. I wouldn't consume the lack of advanced state-of-the-art medicine. And parents should demand the same thing for autism, right? So if parents have a child with autism, they should demand that the therapy they get is state-of-the-art, it's scientifically supported, and that there's nothing happening that isn't moving towards the goal of ameliorating the symptoms of autism. The children deserve it, the parents deserve it, and there's no excuse for not following the science. And finally, you can become educated about the science behind autism. It's a matter of finding professionals or the right websites that can lead you in the right direction. And I'll just throw a couple out there. I feel very comfortable suggesting that people go to, right? The CDC, right? Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.gov. I mean, people who never heard of the CDC, now everyone knows about it, right? Because of what's going on with COVID. But certainly CDC.gov, the National Institutes of Mental Health is another one, www.nimh.gov, the Surgeon General, and Autism Speaks. These are all fantastic ones. And of course, the Autism Collaborative Centers of Excellence here at the University of Scranton. All right, we're going to talk about the very first fact or fiction. And it's go big or go home, right? We're going to go big or go home. Start with, vaccines cause autism, fact or fiction. There's a good reason to start with this, okay? First of all, you can't possibly do a facts or fiction of autism and not talk about vaccines, right? It'd be crazy to try that because someone would say, well, do vaccines cause autism? It's the premier question that people have. But before I say fact or fiction, you might know where I'm going with that. I want to talk first, right? And so first I want to talk a little bit about a clinical perspective and then a scientific perspective. And then I'm going to bring in Dr. Gravely, who's going to tell us all about vaccines. So first of all, I mentioned I'm a therapist, right? I have done, I don't even know how many, it's over 100 diagnostic assessments for families. And many, many, many times I have done an evaluation, done a diagnostic assessment, and I've broken the news to parents that yes, your child is diagnosed with autism, right? And as a therapist, as a psychologist, as an evaluator who's providing that information to parents, they oftentimes want to know why. Why is my child of autism, right? And often, I mean, the right answer to that is we don't know, right? That is the right answer. But it's human nature to want to know why, right? And parents will want to look for something to point to. And sometimes what parents go to is vaccines, right? And so as a therapist, it would be crazy for me in that moment to try to explain to a parent why what they're saying makes no sense scientifically when someone's going through the processing that what they just heard about their child being diagnosed with autism. So there's a way to handle this question with parents, but then there's the science, right? And the science is a little different. And so I'm going to bring in Dr. Gravely. And so Dr. Gravely, while I'm introducing you, why don't you put on your audio and your video there. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Gravely. He's going to talk about vaccines a little bit, and I got a bunch of questions for him. Dr. Michael Gravely, he graduated from Temple University School of Medicine in the year 2000. And I want to also mention that Dr. Gravely is Jesuit educated. He attended St. Joseph's Preparatory School. And we actually overlapped there for 3 years. And he also attended St. Joseph's University, both in Philadelphia. Of course, that was before medical school. He completed a residency in family medicine at Abington Memorial Hospital in 2003 and a fellowship in sports medicine at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in 2004. Dr. Gravely's current clinical work includes urgent care and telehealth. And as I sort of mentioned before, I'm guessing that experience in telehealth before the big game came, really prepares you for this time right now, Dr. Gravely.
Absolutely.
His non-clinical duties include consulting work with hospitals to appeal to insurance company denials, and then he teaches family medicine residents. With that, Dr. Gravely, thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute pleasure to have you in here as our medical expert. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly.
So why don't we start with just like the basics of education here. So what are vaccines? What are they?
Okay, so vaccines are an intervention that are used to protect us from serious infectious diseases. And they're usually injected, and they contain either a weakened or killed form of a virus or bacteria, or sometimes it's a protein that's part of the microorganism. And when they're injected, because it's a weakened or killed state of that microbe, it doesn't cause disease in us, but it can provoke the attended response is an immune response where our B lymphocytes produce antibodies, so that in the future, when we're faced with the infection, our antibodies can then neutralize the microbe. And if enough people are vaccinated, the goal is to have what's called herd immunity, and that means a large percentage of the population has become immune, and that offers indirect protection to those who cannot be vaccinated.
Okay. So I once talked to someone who said he doesn't get a flu vaccine because every time he used to get it, he got the flu. Does that even make any sense? Doesn't sound like it does from what you're saying.
Yeah, no, the flu vaccine, it can cause sort of some subclinical symptoms, maybe a mild fever and soreness and achiness, but it's not true that it causes influenza.
Okay. Interesting. And then about this herd immunity, that's pretty fascinating. So, because we're hearing a lot about that in the news right now about COVID-19, right? So it sounds like there's a threshold you need to reach. So it depends on many, many people in society getting vaccines to get that major protection.
Yeah. So, and the percent needed for herd immunity varies from, virus to virus, or, whatever infection you're talking about. They're talking about with COVID that we really need 70% to have herd immunity. And they determine that based on how effective the infection spreads. And measles, for example, is probably one of the most contagious infections. There's a measure called R naught, which is the amount of people that one person infects. And measles is an airborne virus. So you could have an infected individual cough in a room, and 2 hours later, somebody could walk into that room and be infected. So the R naught for measles is 15, or 12 to 15 is the range. So for herd immunity for measles, because of that high infectivity, the herd immunity requires more about in the neighborhood of 95% vaccinated. So as you can see, as people who are reluctant to vaccinate slips more than 5%, that can endanger, a community with something like measles.
That's interesting. So I was wondering why some of those communities would get real vulnerable. Like there's pockets in California, for example, where there's tons of kids who don't get vaccinated. And I guess if there's enough of them in a small enough area, then you can break that 5% threshold or whatever it is.
Yes, and in fact, there was one locally in Philly in the early 90s. There was a religious community who didn't vaccinate, and it resulted in several children dying from measles. So it's a very infectious illness, and it's very contagious. And the case fatality rate is 0.3%. So 3 out of 1,000 children who contract measles will die from it, and several more can suffer serious neurologic complications. So, that's why scientists set out to find a vaccine for it.
Well, so it sounds like a silly question, but so why do we vaccinate for so many diseases anyway?
So for every disease we vaccinate for, there's a long history of human suffering associated with that disease, and that's why we set out to find vaccines in the first place. And my favorite example is probably probably the most troublesome infections in history, and that's smallpox. So smallpox has an R naught about 5, so one person infects about 5 others, but the case fatality rate's about 30%. So if smallpox enters a community, 2 weeks later, 30% of the people are dead. So a huge problem in human history. And for example, in the 20th century alone, about 100 million people worldwide died of smallpox. So and the only reason why it's been eradicated is a vaccine. So probably one of the greatest triumphs in medical history was the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah, it's really neat. And I don't want to get too much into COVID, but if you could, you're here. So let me just ask you.
Sure. Absolutely.
So there's a combination of how infectious something is and the mortality rate, and those will intersect to determine how important a vaccine is?
Correct. Yeah. So COVID has what we're finding is about a 0.5% case fatality rate. So people might say, well, that's not such a big deal because that's less than 1% of people will die from it. The problem is the R naught. So that there was a study out of China early on in the epidemic, before social distancing measures. The R naught was determined to be 5.7. So one person infects close to 6 others. And if you compare that to the common flu, the R naught is 1.2. So it's much more infectious than the regular flu. So in my opinion, and some others, the greatest problem with COVID is that it's a novel virus. So there's no herd immunity to it. It's never been in our population before. So nobody's immune to it. And it's very contagious. So left to its own devices, they're talking about 70% required to have herd immunity. So it would quickly infect 70% of the population if we weren't careful. Mm-hmm. And, if you do the math, 70% of the United States population is, 200 million people, 0.5% die, so you're talking over a million, potentially, if there were no social distancing measures. So that's why we're taking it so seriously, is if you combine. Now, if you look at something like SARS that was in 2003, that had a case fatality rate about 10%, but it was much less contagious than COVID. So I think fewer than 1,000 people died from it, just because with people who were infected, there weren't any asymptomatic infections. People who were infected were seriously ill, so they didn't really have a chance to infect others. The problem with COVID is we have 80% have mild or no symptoms. Mm-hmm. And 20% have severe symptoms. And so we have a lot of people walking around minimally symptomatic, spreading it. So
thank you. I couldn't resist asking about COVID when I have a medical doctor here. So thanks.
Sure.
How do we know vaccines are safe? Convince me.
Okay. So vaccines they go through multiple rounds of testing. So the first thing they do nowadays, and they did this with COVID, they run the viral genome through a computer algorithm to predict how they will react with our immune system. And when they come up with the vaccine, they test it on cells in a culture, and then the good candidates are then tested on animals. So I read something today where they did a COVID vaccine trial on rhesus monkeys, and they a month or two later were able to find immunity to COVID. And that's the closest primate to human. So there's some hope that might work. So from then, from the animal testing, then it goes on to human testing. So there's 3 phases to clinical trials in humans. Phase 1 usually entails 20 to 100 people. And the pure goal of the phase 1 is to determine the safety. So they're just looking for side effects. Excuse me. And once they prove that safe, then they go on to phase 2, and that can be expanded up to several hundred people to 1,000. And actually, I read there's a phase 2 trial going on, just starting on COVID-19 in Britain. So in phase 2, they continue to look at safety, but they're looking at effectiveness. They're seeing how immune someone who's getting the vaccine will be to the infection. And then phase 3 goes up to several thousands of volunteers, and this can take several years. And they compare the vaccinated versus unvaccinated people, their rates of infection, how effective it is, how safe it is. And if it passes all 3 of those phases, then it goes on to FDA approval. The FDA is going to look at the results of the clinical trials, the safety tests, purity tests, manufacturing methods. And actually, I read only 93% up to 93% of vaccines that go through those phases fail. So not many make it out to the FDA approval.
Wow.
So once it gets FDA approval, the safety testing continues at what's called phase 4, and they continue to look at tens of thousands of people for side effects. And there was a rotavirus vaccine in the 90s where it passed FDA approval, but they found, I think it was 1 in 10,000 people developed a bowel obstruction from it, so they stopped it at that point. So to answer your question, you're talking years of testing. Before they give things to children, they test them on adults. The idea with vaccines is that you're taking an otherwise healthy person and you're injecting something into them. So first do no harm. You don't want to take a healthy person and create a problem. So therefore, the bar is very, very high as far as making sure that these things are safe.
Now, I felt a little confused when I saw on the news that we're working on a vaccine, and then you'd hear Dr. Fauci get on and talk about 12 to 18 months later. And I realized I had no idea how long it takes to develop a vaccine. And you talk about phase 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't have a good sense how long that takes. Like, how long does it take to create a vaccine, and are they fast tracking COVID-19? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so typically it's several years. I think the last one that came on the market was rotavirus, not the one I was talking about in the 90s, but in the last 10 years or so. I think that took about 10 years. I think mumps was I don't know why this happened, but that was in the 60s, and it was about a 4-year process. So I think that was the record, was 4 years. So you're right, 12 to 18 months would be a record for COVID. And there was sort of a head start because SARS and MERS were coronaviruses, so they had a template as far as phase 1 trials and seeing what was safe. But the problem with SARS and MERS epidemics ended, so they sort of stopped the development of those vaccines. But it kind of gave us a head start with COVID, and this is a high priority, fast track vaccine. So there's several of them in development at the same time, several trials going on. So they're hoping they can accumulate enough data to prove something safe and effective in 12 to 18 months, because 4 years plus just won't cut it. And it's really a race, because if you talk about 70% herd immunity, you don't, if we get there just from natural infection, then it really makes the vaccine useless unless we can get it before there's herd immunity from natural infection. And I think right now in New York State there's about 20% prevalence. So if we wait another 12 months, if that gets to 70% or more, the vaccine might not be really helpful. So
amazing. All right, one last question, sort of a two-parter about vaccines before we launch into fact or fictions here. So children get a vaccine schedule, right? I mean, kids get lots of vaccines when they're very young. Why is the schedule the way it is? And can you speak to the wisdom, if there is any, in like a delayed vaccine schedule that some parents request because of the density of the vaccine schedule as it is, as it's normally given?
Sure. So there's a organization called the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and they're part of the CDC. And it's a group of medical and public health experts, and they're endorsed by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And they meet regularly a few times a year, and they look at the data and the studies to recommend the number of doses for each vaccine, the timing between each dose, and the age when infants and children should receive the vaccine. So no vaccine can be put into the schedule unless there's data showing it doesn't interfere with other vaccines and that it's safe and effective. So as far as the delayed vaccine schedule, there's several problems with this approach. One is that there are studies showing that if you delay MMR, for example, that increases the risk for seizure, febrile seizure. So it's actually more harmful to delay MMR than to give it on schedule. Also, there's studies that show, that children at ages 7 to 10 there's no changes in their behavioral or cognitive assessments if they get a normal schedule or a delayed schedule. So I think the intended benefit is to affect a child's cognitive or behavioral development, but the studies don't show that it makes a difference. Other issues to think about is that an under vaccinated child is more vulnerable to the disease itself. especially, we're talking about herd immunity. If let's say there's a community where there's decreased measles herd immunity, and you delay a child to get their measles immunization, they're more likely to get the infection because they're not protected. And so ultimately, when someone chooses to spread out the vaccines and delay them, they're actually making something up that hasn't been tested, and it's actually riskier, and ultimately doesn't result in what they're trying to make happen.
That's fascinating the way you said that you're basically coming up with a schedule that hasn't been tested and that has its own risks, right?
Correct. Yes.
That's interesting. Well, listen, I feel like I could not have gotten that from Google. I appreciate that. Dr. Gravely, do you mind kind of sitting back and if we need to have any other questions answered that you could pop back in?
Absolutely.
The next 15 minutes.
All right.
Thanks so much for that. I'm going to pop back to the next slide here and give my probably not so surprising answer to fact or fiction. So the scientific answer is it is emphatically fiction that vaccines cause autism. And let's talk about why, okay? It all started with a study that was published in 1998 by Wakefield et al. In The Lancet, a British medical journal. And what they showed was a link between the MMR vaccine and incidence of autism. And what happened is, what you're supposed to do in science is one study doesn't mean anything, right? One study sets the occasion for other independent laboratories to do the exact same study and to replicate the results. And that's the important part, right? When an independent laboratory with different subjects in a different place gets the same results. And here's what happened. Nobody could get the same results. Nobody could. They couldn't find a link. So then they start to dig into the actual study, and it turns out there were problems with the data collection, the data depiction. They cherry picked some of the data, and then some of the authors started to admit that they had left some data out, and on and on. And the Lancet retracted this study because it was poor science. At the very least, it was poor science, right? However, there are some very important things that happen that have nothing to do with science that help this fiction kind of persist. And one of them is that parents, they witness something, right? They witness a correlation between the vaccine schedule and the emergence of the symptoms of autism. And we talked earlier about how it's human nature to sort of want to know why and find a link. And the fact of the matter is, whether the child had received the vaccine or not received the vaccine, in all likelihood, the symptoms of autism were going to emerge right when they did, right? And the vaccine schedule is perfectly correlated with when symptoms of autism are likely to show up anyway, right? About 16 months, 18 months, 24 months, 30 months, 36 months of age, right when language is developing and social behavior and all that stuff. And so it just so happens that the vaccine schedule in its density is correlated with when symptoms of autism often do emerge. And so again, it's an interesting thing. I never would want to look a parent in the eye, a parent who has a child with autism, and tell them you're wrong. The vaccines don't cause autism, so quit saying it, right? But there's a danger, right? Many parents of children with autism will then not vaccinate their other children, or will try to convince others to not vaccinate their children. And when I kind of said earlier about not to confuse a Google search with a professional education, the fact of the matter is there are some celebrities who have big followings, like Jenny McCarthy, who perpetuate this fiction, and it puts people in danger. There's a whole long other list of things that go into this. Like just a few years ago, they crossed the 1 million subject barrier, where there's been enough studies done in enough countries that finally there's been more than 1 million people who've gone through these studies trying to find a link between MMR and autism. They just haven't been able to do it. They took out the thimerosal, and the rates of autism stayed the same. In fact, it went up over time as we became better at detecting autism and on and on. And so whether it's the Mercury hypothesis or the MMR hypothesis, none of it has held up scientifically. I want to always qualify. I would never, ever, ever, though, want to suggest to a parent that even though there's a scientific explanation, right, that we as a science aren't empathetic to what might seem like a very real thing when it isn't. Okay, next statement, fact or fiction. We don't know what causes autism. This is a fact. We're not sure. We're really not. Now, there's a lot of research that is developing very rapidly about the influences on autism. And I got to tell you, it was so funny. There's such a difference. So there's a headline, and then there's an article, like a CNN or Fox News or whatever you read article, and then there's like a study, right? And so the headline might be, researchers find gene that causes autism. And you go, wow, that's big news, right? And then you read the news article, and it'll turn out that they did a gene deletion or series of gene deletions or whatever they did in mice. And they were able to model symptoms of autism. And then you read the study, and the actual study will say, this is a genetic modeling study, and has really no applicability to humans at all right now, and could influence research 10 or 20 years down the road, right? So whenever you see a headline like that, you got to delve deeper and see what is really the science. The current research certainly suggests a strong hereditary component. And in fact, I have another slide later which talks more about that. And just to give you a sense on the background, if you want to call it risk or prevalence of autism, is about 1.5%, right? 1 out of 59 individuals will be diagnosed with autism. If there's a sibling in the family, it increases by about 18%, the odds that another child in the family will have autism. And if there's 2 children in a family with autism, it increases the risk for another child to 32%. So we know that if there's someone with autism, a child with autism in a family, the risk for subsequent children being diagnosed with autism, it goes up for sure. What we think is that autism likely results from a very, very complex, and I'm just totally scratching the surface there, right? Totally complex interaction between or among genes, right? It's not going to be one gene, right? It's going to be a bunch of genes that play roles in brain signaling and development, and then there's going to be environmental, biologic, genetic factors that will contribute to autism, okay? And there's very interesting case studies about this, right? So you may have, like the twin studies are the best, right? So you could have identical twins who neither has autism. You can have identical twins where they both have autism, and you say, well, gosh, that's a really, that shows like a very strong genetic link, right? Lots of twins, they neither do, and lots of twins both do. But there are examples of identical twins. One has autism and can be severely, the symptoms can be severe, right? And the other twin, perfectly, typically developing like same age peers, right? So it can't just be genetic in that case, right? If you got identical twins and one has autism and the other doesn't. So we know that there's likely a very complex genetic situation interacting with the environment, how those interplay, the relative roles of heredity and the environment, exactly what those genes are and what those environmental factors are. We just don't know. It is a fact. We don't know what causes autism. All right, there's an autism epidemic, right? And the reason why someone might ask that question is like, haven't the rates of autism, like, haven't they gone up exponentially? And they have. In terms of the reported prevalence data, is there an epidemic? or pandemic? Probably not, right? In fact, it's funny when I did some presentations internationally, and even though in the United States we bemoan and lament that we don't have enough access to care and there's not enough education and on, the situation in other countries is not as advanced as in the United States. And I was actually at a presentation where I was presenting to thousands of people in Brazil, and somebody asked me if autism was contagious. And you can ask anyone who knows me, not usually at a loss for words, okay? Not usually. But boy, oh boy, I had to take a deep breath and think before I answered that question, because the answer is obviously, no, you can't sneeze and pass autism on to someone else. But I was wholly unprepared for the question, right? But it sort of makes sense. Like if you're not trained, and if someone tells you that 15 years ago it was 1 out of 10,000 individuals, and then 10 years ago it was 1 out of 2,000, and then 7 years ago it's 1 out of 250, and then a couple of years ago it was 1 out of 150, and then 1 out of 99, now it's 1 out of 59. What's happening? Is there an epidemic? Okay, prevalence data definitely have changed. There's no doubt about it. So why? All right. We don't know exactly, but we have some hypotheses. First of all, we are better. We are better at doing diagnosing. There's no question about it, right? The diagnostic criteria are tighter. We're better at doing differential diagnosis. We're better at finding individuals and getting them correctly diagnosed. We have access to individuals in the past that we didn't because of changes in federal law, right? So people who were in rural areas, who maybe didn't have the same access to professionals to do screening and diagnostic evaluations, and all of a sudden, well, as federal law changed, all of a sudden these individuals were put in front of professionals who could provide a diagnosis. And so awareness, right? 20 years ago, no one heard the word autism. Now if you ask someone, do you know what autism is? They can't necessarily articulate exactly what it is, but they definitely have a nephew or a neighbor who has a kid, or they know someone who their kid's in school, the kid has autism, or whatever it is, right? I mean, everyone is connected to some degree nowadays. And it's rare that you hear someone who says, well, I haven't even heard of the word autism. But is it an epidemic? No, probably not. There's not something in the water that's all of a sudden producing autism. Bad parents cause autism. It's fiction. Absolute fiction. What's funny is this whole cold mother hypothesis. It's laughable to someone in sort of this day and age, right? That was something, especially I don't look. I'm a dad, and I don't want to ever claim that the dads aren't involved, because they are. Dads are more involved than they've ever been. But it is wholly because of grassroots efforts by angry, and they should be angry, now educated, and just these grassroots efforts by the mothers of children with autism, who have knocked on doors, they've gone to schools, they've gone to City Hall and called the representatives, and have made such an impact on changing how society helps individuals who are diagnosed with autism, getting individuals screened in the first place, and things like that. So this whole cold mother hypothesis, it isn't true. Again, it's going to be a mix of nature and nurture to produce a diagnosis of autism. And then not only that, autism is non-discriminatory. It's 1 out of 59, no matter your race, your religion, your creed, your political orientation, your SES, where you live, anywhere on this planet. The rate of autism, the risk of it, is the same. You're a good parent, you're a bad parent. I hope you're not a bad parent. But if you're a bad parent, it's not going to cause autism. All right, with that, it is 8:45. It's our end time for this town hall meeting. I want to thank you sincerely for coming here to listen to me and Dr. Gravely talk about facts and fictions of autism. Dr. Gravely, I'm smarter now than I was earlier because of what you presented, and I really appreciate that. I didn't see any questions pop up, but I do want to say that Dr. Gravely in the past has very graciously agreed to field questions if they come in via email or something like that. So if you do have any questions you think of later, please feel free to send them to Dr. Dunleavy, and she will pass them on. Oh, I'm glad you popped back in, Dr. Gravely, so I can look you in the eye sort of and tell you thank you for joining me. It's been a great pleasure having you join us on these town halls. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, awesome. With that, everyone, have a great night, and I hope to see you at a future town hall. Check out our website. We have some super exciting things happening. I have not one, but perhaps two, I dare say, celebrity-style town hall guests coming up soon, and it's going to hopefully be quite exciting. So we'll see what happens. Keep checking out the website. We got more to come. Thank you. Have a great night.